Hello and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'll show you how to create simple clouds using lifting techniques, and in part 2 we'll create this heart-shaped cloud card. Let's start with the supplies. I'm using Canson XL watercolor paper, which is an inexpensive paper made from wood pulp, so no cotton. Up next, the brushes. I'm using a large flat brush as well as a Filbert brush. The rounded bristles are excellent for cloud shapes. The paint I'm using today is cobalt blue. This one here is from Aloha Watercolors and is called Blue Canoe. Next, we'll need a mixing palette and a paper towel. Example number 1, wet paint and paper towel. I'm starting with a layer of cobalt blue using about 50% water and 50% pigment. It's a bit tricky to give exact numbers, but just make sure you have a nice opaque layer of blue on the paper. Add more pigment straight from the paint pan if need be. Now for the paper towel. Dip a corner into a jar of water, but make sure you dip it only a little bit. We want moist, not dripping wet. Ball it up snugly and start blotting. The more pressure you apply, the more blue pigment will come away from the paper. Next, I'm holding the paper towel lightly while gently touching the paper. Less pigment will come off the paper than when you press down hard. Explore different pressures and going slow versus fast while you're blotting to create different textures. Example number 2. We're using the same premises, but instead of a paper towel, we'll apply a brush. I'm dipping my Filbert brush in water, then dab it on a paper towel. It should still be moist, not completely dry. This is what it looks like when you apply the brush with lots of pressure. It takes away quite a bit of pigment. Dab the brush on the paper towel before you grab more pigments. Make sure to rinse the brush with water after every other stroke and dry it on the paper towel. It sure is a lot of wiping and rinsing for this technique. The advantage is that you have more control with a brush than with a paper towel and can create more different shapes. Now that we've explored both the towel and brush technique, let's combine them in example number 3. Just like before, apply a layer of cobalt blue and start dabbing away the pigment with a damp paper towel. Then apply a damp brush to add some shapes to the clouds and even paint in some shapes with excess paint on the brush. You can go back and forth between brush and towel and see what combo works for you. In example number 4, I'll try and apply the same technique on dry paint. You'll see that it just does not work as well as when the paint is still wet. I'm using a damp towel and rubbing at the paper, and I do manage to get some pigment off, but it's kinda like a subtle effect. Same goes for the brush. Depending on what kind of paper you use, you might end up damaging the paper if you rub too much. It still works, but I recommend you use this technique on wet paint and paper. Here are a few more examples of using the same technique but on different papers, from Arches cotton paper over Strathmore regular wood pulp paper and in my Moleskine watercolor sketchbook. Try out different papers and paints for this technique to find out which combo works best for you. Before we jump into the card project, I'd like to point out that I have a video here on my channel where I'll guide you step by step through creating a sunrise landscape using lifting technique, and I'll leave a card up here for you to check it out. Alright, but let's move on to the card. I still had a few pieces of Fabriano cold press watercolor paper already cut into a card shape, so that's what I'm using here. As I will be using lots of water, I'm taping down the paper with some washi tape. It also creates a nice border and a crisp edge for my painting. Next, I'm sketching a heart, not quite in the center but slightly above, with a Color Eno erasable mechanical blue pencil. You can find all materials listed in the description below. If you're unsure how to draw a heart, it helps to envision a square like this divided by 2 lines. Then you can fit the heart shape right in. By the way, I have a template for this card design for you to download. You can find the link in the description below. Let's start with the background. I'm painting in the background using lots of water and making sure I'm leaving out the heart shape and painting around it. Next, I'll drop in cobalt blue and again, making sure I'm painting around the heart shape. I'm also dropping in some black ochre, but that's totally optional. You can paint your card just blue or maybe add a color like pink or purple for some variation. Next, just like we did in the first exercise, I'm taking a damp paper towel and start blotting away, creating some basic cloud shapes. I'm using quite a bit of pressure to blot away as much pigment as possible and create white shapes. Make sure you use different parts of your paper towel and not reuse the same bit over and over again, as it will get saturated with paint. The next step is optional, but I find that it makes the heart fit into the overall composition better. I blot away some blue along the outline of the heart to make it look a bit more cloud-like. Next, I'm adding more blue to the still wet paper. It's important to only add more paint if your paper is still wet. Otherwise, you'll end up with lots of drying edges. Use your damp brush to soften any harsh edges you see by gently blending them into the background. In the next step, I'm adding watered down black to the underside of the clouds to give them more of a three-dimensional feel. I'm keeping things very loose here, but you can of course go ahead and do lots of smoothing out and blending with a damp brush. Let everything dry completely before you add lettering or stamps to the heart. I'm lightly writing out my quote, "Sky is the limit," with pencil, before going over it with a Tombow Phtalo brush pen. Again, the link to the template for this card is in the description below. While thinking about what to write in the heart, I came across a few cute sayings that go well with Valentine's Day, which is coming up soon. For example, "With you, I'm floating on air," or the classic, "On cloud 9 with you." Or how about, "You're the most beautiful cloud in the sky," or "You're seriously awesome." CIRRUSLY. If you have a cloud-related pun or saying that you'd like to share, please write it down in the comments below. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, happy creating and aloha! I was going to record a few beautiful fluffy clouds for you, but alas, this is what our sky has been looking like for the last few months due to the volcano erupting on the other side of the island. So it's pretty foggy, which is a mix of the words smog and volcano. And, well, actually you can see a few clouds. Or maybe it's just my imagination.